This story is called Restaurant Denies Black Woman Service, until they learn she's the food critic who can shut them down. Hey, before we get into today's video, I need your help. Subscribing is one of the best ways to support us. It's fast, free, and helps us continue to bring you amazing content. Your support means a lot. Thank you so much. Now let's get into the story. Monique Carter knew the moment she walked into LeBlanc Bistro that something was off. It wasn't the decor. The place was beautiful, all white tablecloths and soft golden lighting. It wasn't the aroma of fresh-baked bread wafting from the kitchen. It wasn't even the quiet hum of conversation as well-dressed patrons sipped their expensive wine. No, it was the way the hostess' smile vanished the second she saw Monique. Monique had been here before. Not to this restaurant specifically, but to plenty just like it. The ones where the staff suddenly lose reservations when they see a black woman walking alone. The ones where the service becomes mysteriously slow, the best tables mysteriously unavailable. She adjusted the silk scarf around her neck and stepped forward, flashing the polite but firm smile she had mastered over the years. "Good evening," she said. "Reservation for Carter. 7 o'clock. The hostess, an icy blonde who looked like she had been plucked straight from a fashion catalog, scanned the reservation book, her manicured nails tapping against the pages. Then came the inevitable lie. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "I don't see a reservation under that name." Monique exhaled through her nose. "That's funny, because I made it 2 weeks ago. Through your website." The hostess gave her an apologetic shrug. "It must have been a system error. Unfortunately, we're fully booked tonight." Monique turned slightly, glancing around the half-empty dining room. Fully booked, huh? She knew what this was. She'd played this game before. But tonight, they had picked the wrong woman to mess with. Because Monique Carter wasn't just some random diner. She was MJ Carter, one of the most influential food critics in the country. And by the time she was done, LeBlanc Bistro wouldn't know what hit them. Monique took a slow breath, keeping her expression neutral. "That's disappointing," she said smoothly. "I was really looking forward to trying the menu." The hostess gave her a well-rehearsed, insincere smile. "I'm sure we can accommodate you another time. Maybe next month?" Next month. She had some nerve. Monique had played this game before, but tonight, she wasn't in the mood for it. Not after the day she'd had. Not after spending the last 2 weeks meticulously planning this review. She adjusted the strap of her bag and let her eyes scan the room. Then, the first twist. Over the hostess's shoulder, she spotted a white couple approaching the podium. They looked about her age, mid-30s, polished, comfortable in their privilege. "Reservation for Winslow," the man said. The hostess barely glanced at the book before lighting up with a bright, welcoming smile. "Of course. Right this way." Monique didn't even bother to hide her smirk. "Bingo. Interesting," she mused, loud enough for the hostess to hear. "Your system only seems to make errors when it comes to customers who look like me." The hostess stiffened, her smile faltering. "Excuse me? You just told me you were fully booked," Monique said evenly. "Yet you had no problem seating them." The hostess hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. Before she could stammer out another excuse, a woman nearby let out an exaggerated sigh. "Oh, here we go," the woman muttered, not even bothering to lower her voice. Monique turned her head slightly. A well-dressed, middle-aged white woman in a navy blue dress was swirling her wine, looking thoroughly unimpressed. "Excuse me?" Monique said, arching an eyebrow. The woman took a slow sip from her glass before setting it down with an irritated clink. "You people are always looking for something to complain about," she said casually. "Maybe they really are full. Maybe you should stop making everything about race." Ah. There it was. A few nearby diners went quiet, shifting awkwardly in their seats. Others pretended not to hear. Monique let out a breath through her nose, resisting the urge to laugh. "Ma'am," she said slowly, "you don't even know me, And you've already decided I'm one of those people just because I asked why my reservation mysteriously disappeared? The woman rolled her eyes. I'm just saying, people like you are always stirring up trouble. Maybe you should take the hint and go somewhere else. Monique smiled. A slow, knowing smile. Because this woman had no idea who she had just spoken to. She turned back to the hostess, who now looked like she wanted to disappear. I'll ask you one last time, Monique said, her voice still perfectly calm. Are you sure you don't have my reservation? The hostess swallowed hard. But before she could speak, a deep voice cut through the air. Is there a problem here? A man in a sleek black suit stepped forward. Silver-haired, sharp-jawed, the manager. And from the look in his eyes, Monique could tell. He was about to make a very big mistake. The manager's smile was polite, but his eyes were sharp. Is there a problem here? He repeated, glancing between Monique and the hostess, as if already deciding who was to blame for this disruption. Monique didn't rush to answer. She wanted to see how deep this bias ran before she played her next card. That depends, she said smoothly. Do you consider a lost reservation for a black customer a problem? The manager's expression flickered for the briefest moment before settling into something neutral. I assure you, our restaurant does not discriminate, ma'am. We're simply at full capacity. Monique gestured toward a row of empty tables near the window. Are you? She asked, tilting her head. Those tables are reserved for our VIP guests. Interesting, Monique mused. Because I made my reservation 2 weeks ago. I assume that would make me a guest worthy of a table? The manager's jaw tightened. Unfortunately, reservations are prioritized for regular patrons and high-profile guests. There it was. The same tired excuse, wrapped in different words. Monique let the silence stretch. She wanted him to sit in it. Nearby, a waiter was watching the exchange with careful eyes. He was young, maybe early 20s, and black. He wasn't interfering, but Monique could tell he'd seen this happen before. I see, Monique finally said, keeping her voice even. And tell me, exactly how many black patrons are considered regulars here? The manager's face twitched ever so slightly. Ma'am, I don't appreciate the insinuation. I'm not insinuating anything, she said. I'm asking a direct question. Are black customers ever considered VIPs in this restaurant? Or do you just find convenient ways to turn them away? A low murmur rippled through the diners nearby. People were listening now. The manager's polished facade started to crack. He exhaled sharply, losing patience. Look, if you'd like, I can put you on our waiting list, and we'll see if a table opens up. Monique let out a slow breath. So let me get this straight. A reservation made weeks ago, that was confirmed in your system, is now missing. Yet white diners walk in off the street and are seated within minutes. And your best offer is a waiting list? The manager's lips pressed into a thin line. Before he could speak, the young black waiter suddenly took a step forward. Ms. Carter is right, he said. The manager's head snapped toward him. Excuse me? The waiter hesitated, but then squared his shoulders. I've worked here for a year, he continued. I've seen this happen over and over. When black customers come in, their reservations suddenly go missing, or they get seated near the kitchen instead of the main floor. It's not a mistake. It's a pattern. The dining room fell dead silent. Monique turned back to the manager, who now looked like he wanted to throttle the young employee. But it was too late. The truth was out. The manager's polite mask was gone, replaced by something much colder. Derek, he said, his voice dangerously low, I suggest you return to the kitchen. Now. The young waiter hesitated, but before he could decide whether to obey, the front door swung open. A sharp-dressed black man in an expensive suit stepped inside, flanked by 2 others. He scanned the room, then locked eyes with the manager. The blood drained from the manager's face. Monique noticed the way the staff suddenly stiffened, the way the hostess instinctively lowered her gaze. Whoever this man was, he was important. And from the look on his face, he had just heard every single word. The moment Langston stepped through the door, the entire energy of the restaurant shifted. The manager, who had spent the last 10 minutes treating Monique like an inconvenience, now looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. "Mr. Langston," he stammered, his voice suddenly thick with forced politeness. What a surprise. Langston didn't return the greeting. He was tall, mid-50s, with the kind of presence that demanded respect without asking for it. His tailored suit was crisp, his expression unreadable. But his eyes? His eyes were locked on Monique. "Miss Carter," he said smoothly. "Funny running into you here." Monique raised an eyebrow. He knew who she was. She wasn't sure whether that was a good thing yet, but she rolled with it. "Mr. Langston," she greeted. "You eat here often?" Langston let out a low chuckle. "Not after tonight." The manager visibly paled. "Sir, Langston held up a hand. "Save it," he said, his voice calm but final. "I heard enough before I even walked through that door." The manager physically flinched. The hostess took a small step back. The dining room had gone silent. Everyone was watching. Langston took a slow step forward, his sharp gaze sweeping the restaurant. "I was supposed to be hosting an event here next month," he said casually. "Big names. Private dinner. Exclusive wine pairings. Whole deal." The manager perked up immediately. Yes, of course, sir, we've been looking forward to." Langston cut him off with a chuckle. "Yeah. About that." He shook his head. "I don't think I can bring my guests somewhere that treats black women like second-class citizens." The manager looked like he had been punched in the gut. "Sir, please, this was just a misunderstanding." "Was it?" Langston asked, tilting his head. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like business as usual." The cracks in the system were showing. Monique watched as the manager desperately tried to regain control. "Miss Carter," he blurted out, turning back to her. Please, let us make it up to you. Your meal will be comped, of course. Anything you want. On the house." Monique just smiled. "Now, why would I want to eat somewhere that didn't want me here in the first place?" The manager opened his mouth, then shut it again. He had no answer. Langston let out a low hum, looking around at the other diners, at the waitstaff, at the people still pretending not to hear. Then, finally, he turned back to the manager and delivered the final blow. "Cancel the event," he said. The manager visibly recoiled. "Sir?" No, Langston's voice was firm. "If I spend money somewhere, it'll be at a place that doesn't see my people as an inconvenience. Consider our business relationship terminated." The words landed like a hammer. The manager looked like he wanted to vomit. Monique had to hand it to him. He tried one last time. "Mr. Langston, please. This is going to ruin us." Langston gave him a long, unreadable look. Then, finally, he smirked. "Good." And just like that, he turned and walked out. Monique adjusted the strap of her bag, taking in the sight of the completely destroyed manager. Then she turned and followed. As the restaurant doors swung shut behind her, she already knew. By morning, this place was done. By morning, LeBlanc Bistro was all over the news. Monique hadn't even written her review yet, but she didn't have to. The public was already doing it for her. Elite restaurant denies service to black food critic, manager's panic caught on camera. LeBlanc Bistro faces backlash after viral discrimination scandal. Twitter was on fire. Yelp and Google reviews had turned into a battleground. Within hours, their once pristine rating had crumbled. But Monique wasn't focused on the social media storm. She was focused on her email inbox. Because in between the interview requests and messages of support, there there was one subject line that caught her attention. Urgent, call me immediately, Richard Benoit, owner of Le Blanc Bistro. Ah. There it was. She took a sip of her coffee, debating whether she even wanted to entertain this conversation. Then, out of pure curiosity, she picked up her phone and dialed. The voice on the other end was already frazzled. Ms. Carter. Thank you for calling me back. Listen, we need to talk. There's been a huge misunderstanding. Monique raised an eyebrow. Is that right? Absolutely. What happened at my restaurant was unacceptable, and I take full responsibility. The manager, he's already been suspended. I just want to make things right. Monique let the silence stretch. She'd been in this game long enough to hear the difference between real remorse and damage control. This was desperation. I appreciate the apology, Mr. Benoit, she said finally. But let's be honest, you don't actually care about what happened. You care that you got caught. There was a pause. Then, the mask slipped. Look, Benoit sighed, his voice losing its rehearsed politeness. We're hemorrhaging business right now. Sponsors are pulling out. VIP clients are canceling. And let's not even talk about the legal threats coming in. Sounds rough. It is. He exhaled sharply. Which is why I'm willing to offer you a deal. Monique tilted her head. A deal? Yes, he said quickly. I'll issue a formal apology. A full donation to a racial equity fund, hell, I'll even rename a damn dish after you. You just need to put out a statement saying you accept the apology and that this was all blown out of proportion. Monique smiled. There it was. The real reason for this call. And what happens if I say no, she asked, already knowing the answer. Benoit's voice dropped. Then, this gets ugly. Ah. Threats. Monique didn't flinch. That sounds an awful lot like a warning, Mr. Benoit. I'm just saying, he muttered, these things have a way of turning into witch hunts. People get tired of outrage. If you keep pushing this, some folks might start digging into you instead. Monique laughed. A full, unbothered, rich laugh. That's adorable, she said. But let me tell you something, your reputation. It's already 6 feet under. And the best part? I didn't even have to write a damn thing. She could hear his breathing on the other end, heavy with frustration. You made your bed, Mr. Benoit, she continued. Now lie in it. And with that, she hung up. That night, as she scrolled through the news coverage, she smiled to herself. Le Blanc Bistro was done. And she never even had to pick up a pen.